All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about something I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is this idea of learning from living systems in something called biomimicry in the Principles for Ecological Civilization. John Cobb said this 9 years ago when we gathered for the 2015 conference, that we are coming to the end of an age. And after 250 years of unsustainable practices, it seems that the question we now face is not if modern industrial civilization will end, but what's going to take its place. So I hope that what will come next is an ecological civilization. But what is an ecological civilization, right? This is our hope, this is our dream, this is what we're working toward, but what is it anyways? I would contend that one way of thinking about it is that an ecological civilization is a life-affirming civilization. And that means that we need to restructure all aspects of human society, the totality of how we live and structure our communities. So our economics, our agriculture, our systems of education, our systems of governance, how we feed ourselves, how we make decisions together, all of this needs to be reconceived and restructured or redesigned in ways that maximize the flourishing of life. Because the flourishing of life is the goal, that's the function, that's the purpose of an ecological civilization. That's what it's all about. If that's true, maybe it's not, and you're welcome to disagree with me. If that's true, if an ecological civilization is about promoting life, it seems that building an ecological civilization would require a better understanding of life itself. We need to answer at least 3 fundamental questions. There are more, but these are the 3 that I suggest. What is the world like? What is the world like? What is nature like? How does life organize? How does it flourish? What does it mean to be human? Who are we in the context of this universe story? And how should we live in light of that self-understanding? I fear that too often our allies, our advocates of sustainable development, want to jump straight to question 3. We want to think about the practical changes that we need to make, but we do that often very disconnected from the deeper shifts in consciousness that are required for what I think is really a new kind of civilization. We need to start with thinking about what does it mean to be human and what is the world like. So an ecological civilization, I would say, is not about how humans can save nature, but actually about how nature can save humanity. You see, if humanity is to survive what's ahead, the ending of an age, we need to understand how it is that living systems flourish. We need to reimagine what it means for humanity to be a part of that web of life so that we can reconstruct human society according to the same principles that enable all living systems to prosper. What I'm actually talking about here, what I'm proposing, you could say is a type of biomimicry. What that means is it's nature imitation. We are using nature as our model and we're imitating it, right? We see this in examples in science and technology all the time. A bird inspires our design of an airplane to make it more efficient and effective. The creation of Velcro, the sticky fabric, we learn that from plants and observing plants. But as one of the leading thinkers on biomimicry has said, unlike the Industrial Revolution, the biomimicry revolution introduces an era based not on what we can extract from nature, not what we can take from nature to use for our own ends, but on what we can learn from her, right? It's a radical shift in thinking about how we relate to the rest of the living earth, of which we are not separate from, but are a part of. So some of the best inventions that we have really do come from studying plants and animals. Because, and this is why, right? Observing living systems, in doing so we get to learn what designs work best in the world. This idea that fossils are failures, right? Our failures are fossils. That if something doesn't work, then it means the end of life. So we look at life, we look at living systems and how they work in order to inform our own understanding of what works in the world. So we do this in science and technology all the time, increasingly so. And I would argue that this same technique, imitation of nature, biomimicry, could also revolutionize how human life itself is organized. So our social organization, it includes how we feed ourselves, how we make decisions collectively, how we govern, how we navigate conflict, even how we learn, could all be informed, inspired, and guided by what we learn from nature. So I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on all things nature and all things the living earth and all things living systems, but I will say, based on observations of others who are way smarter than me, it seems that these are at least 8 possible living systems principles. There could be 800, right? But this is a starting point. So here are some of the things that we've learned by observing living systems. 1, life creates the conditions conducive to more life. There's something about the way that life and living systems function that perpetuate and promote more life. Life is pro-life. It's kind of, it feels circular, and perhaps it is, but also wholly consistent. The second piece is that life flourishes through cooperation. This runs counter to the sort of Darwinian story of survival of the fittest and competition is everything. And I'm not saying that there's no room for appropriate competition, but I'm saying that it's through cooperation, collaboration, through networks of networks, that actually life flourishes. This idea of a fragmented individual competition is just not what we see in nature, where we see life flourishing. Life adapts, changes, and evolves. It's not static. It's not sort of just there. It's constantly reacting to and, I guess, shaping the world around it. Again, to that purpose of making the conditions more suitable for more life. Living systems are also self-organizing. There's something about the way they emerge, the way they organize themselves, that perhaps could guide us in thinking about how we should organize human communities. Living systems are interdependent, not independent. They're interdependent, right? They relate, they depend on one another. Living systems need diversity. We see this especially with biodiversity, but all kinds of diversity are necessary for the flourishing of life. And perhaps that would even be true in human communities, the diversity of ideas, the diversity of cultures. That living systems don't waste. I think we heard that the other day from Dr. Snowis. There's something about the way that living systems are organized where they sort of take what they need, they produce what they need, but not more and not less, right? There's an appropriate relationship between the consumption and need, rather than overconsumption, which is the human problem. And also this idea, and Janine Benmis says this in her book, Biomimicry, that living systems run on sunlight, which is kind of an obvious thing, but at the same time, very counter to how most of our energy sources have been created. So think about these 8 principles of living systems. Reflect on them. What would it look like to transform human societies accordingly? I think that one of the big problems with our current form of human existence is just that it doesn't follow those kinds of principles. It doesn't follow the principles of living systems. Because modern civilization runs on fossil fuels rather than sunlight. It's got systems that are driven by economic competition rather than cooperation. It's all about destroying life rather than protecting it, and producing wasteful items of excess and convenience at the expense of the long-term planetary health. We're doing the wrong things. Why is it wrong? Because it's not how living systems function. It's not what produces life and allows it to flourish. So how should we change, right? Well, if we are learning from nature and we're learning from living systems, Some of the lessons could lead to things like this: redesigning human systems as living systems. It might mean the end of military violence, which of course destroys life, human and otherwise. We heard that call from John Cobb the other day for the call for nonviolence and for peace, particularly between nations. It may result in redesigning our economies to be well-being economies, to be circular economies, ecological economies, that involve things like robust cooperatives that are worker-owned, as opposed to where, well, we don't have to get into capitalism. Education, right? We're rethinking education that prioritizes creativity as opposed to just memorization. It would involve rethinking democratic decision-making structures such that we have strong local governance and people have voices and decision power over their own lives, not just over the lives of people millions of miles away. We'd have communities that are inclusive and hospitable to difference, not isolated silos where we are surrounding ourselves only with people who agree with us. We would have agriculture systems that actually regenerate topsoil rather than these large crops of monoculture annuals that are actually eroding the ability for the soil to produce more food. We would need to enhance biodiversity, not destroy it. We need sustainable modes of production and consumption within the limits of our finite planet, within the limits to growth. And we need renewable energy and the end of fossil fuels. These are just 8 possibilities of the kinds of changes that we might make to build an ecological civilization. But I think that they're profound and fundamental shifts that would really yield significant results. So, conclusion. Here's an obvious insight for you. We are alive. We're alive, people. We are alive. And what that actually means is super significant. We are a part of nature. We're a part of the web of life. We're a part of living systems. And why is that significant? Because if human life is to flourish, we need to follow the principles that enable all of life to flourish. We're not different from the rest of life. We are beholden to the same conditions necessary to flourish. We still need to eat, to breathe, to have shelter, to have community. These are the basic conditions that allow all living things to flourish, and those are the same conditions that will enable us to flourish. The lessons that are learned from living systems, the lessons learned through biomimicry, can actually provide us a blueprint for designing an ecological civilization. And I believe that this kind of work will need to be interdisciplinary. It's going to require great collaboration from experts across the world, bringing together scientists and philosophers and economists and educators and farmers and people like you at a much greater scale than we've ever seen before in order to work together to be able to build the future that we need. I think this is our task, and I think this is our hope. So let's get to work. Thank you.